Finally, GPT-5 is here. So here's my full unscripted review of it. I'm going to show you all the cool things it can do, but also talk about its limitations. Plus, of course, we're also going to go over its specs and performance and compare it with the other leading AI models out there. Let's jump right in. Let's start with some tricky prompts to test out GPT-5. Now, as with all of the top AI models out there, GPT-5 excels across STEM subjects like coding, math, science, and research. So that's primarily what I'm going to show you in this video. Of course, you can also get it to do simple stuff like writing essays or replying to emails, but honestly, all the models out there can already do these tasks pretty well. Thanks to HubSpot for sponsoring this video. For my first prompt, let's try this. Make a visual simulation of a beehive construction showing hexagonal cells forming, worker bee paths, and honey storage. Include sliders for colony size and resource availability. Put everything in a standalone HTML file. And then over here, I'm also going to turn on Canvas so that we can preview the code in a side window. Let's click Generate. And here is what we get. Indeed, we have a colony of bees, and they are proceeding to gather pollen from nearby flowers, and then storing the honey back into the hive, and then also expanding the hive. Very nice. Now I can also increase the colony size, and this will disperse even more bees. I can also decrease resource availability so that basically there's less pollen, so the honey is supposed to fill up slower. And as you can see, the hive is indeed expanding. Let me see if the pause button works. Yes, it does. Let me see if reset works. And yes, it does. So there you go. In just one prompt, 0 shot, it's able to construct this beehive simulator. Very impressive. Next, let's see how good it is at creating games. So for the prompt, I'm going to write make a 3D racing game through neon lit cyberpunk tracks with speed boosts and collision physics. Put everything in a standalone HTML file. Let's click Generate. Alright, so you can see here it thought for 16 seconds, and I really like its short and concise response. This is a no BS model similar to Grok 4. It doesn't go on and on explaining its answer. Anyways, let's start playing this. Alright, let's see what happens if I hit one of these yellow blocks. Alright, so it seems to slow me down if I hit one of these yellow blocks, and then if I hover over these pink blocks, then it seems to give me a speed boost. Very nice. Indeed, this is a 3D racing game along this neon-lit cyberpunk track, and it does include some collision physics, although ideally for these yellow blocks, I would like the car to just crash into it and stop. But it got the pink squares correct. It does give me a speed boost if I drive over those elements. And everything just works out of the box. This is the power behind GPT-5. I find that in terms of at least coding simple apps like this, it's a lot less error prone than the other top models. Alright, next let's test out its physics understanding and its ability to generate different visualizers and dynamics. So here I'm going to get it to create an animation of fluid dynamics. Include interactivity and sliders with multiple color dyes. And again, here's my key phrase, put everything in an HTML file. Again, I'm going to turn on Canvas, which would help us preview the app in the side window. Let's click Generate. Alright, and here's what we get. So it thought for 17 seconds. Let's click Run Code, and let's start by just drawing over this, and you can see it's adding some dyes to our canvas over here. Now, right now, this is just red, so let's also add some blue dye, and indeed, we can see some blue dye, and it's mixing with the red. Very cool. Or here is some yellow dye. And then I can also increase the settings here. So let's decrease the diffusion, increase the viscosity so that it's kind of mixing a bit slower. Let's also decrease the time step. Very nice. Now, instead of these colors, I can also click randomize colors, and it would give me some new colors to add to the mix. And then here is green. Let's click randomize colors again. Here is some yellow. Very nice. And then what is dissipation? I guess this is like how fast or quickly the colors disappear. So let me decrease this. And then vorticity, I have no idea what this is, but let's just try out all the settings. And then we also have dye amount. So if I increase this, then it becomes way more colorful, I guess. And then if I press clear, it indeed clears the canvas. You can also select from these resolutions. So let's select a higher resolution, and hopefully that doesn't crash my graphics card. But as you can see here, everything just works. This is really cool. So there you go. Here is this interactive fluid dynamic visualizer, which it got in just one prompt, 0 shot. And indeed, it is able to simulate these fluid dynamics. And it's also mixing the colors. Very nice. Now I can go crazy with this and drag my mouse everywhere, and this is what we get. Super fun to play with. Next, let's see how good it is at ray tracing. So here the prompt is develop a real-time ray tracing simulation featuring a metallic sphere suspended above a street scene. Use any 3D Street View environment and allow adjustable parameters such as reflectivity, roughness, and other material properties of the sphere. Let's click generate. Alright, and here's what we get. Now notice that the first generation had an error, but I actually saw a pop-up message down here saying that it detected an error and there was a button which I could click called Fix Bug. So it looks like it can autonomously detect and correct its own errors. And after clicking Fix Bug, here is what we get. Indeed, here is a metallic sphere and it does reflect the surrounding environment. Very cool. I can also scroll my mouse to increase or decrease the size of this. And then let's see what reflectivity does. It doesn't look like this slider does anything. What about roughness? Now, roughness works very well. So if we increase the roughness, then of course it's going to be less reflective. Let me decrease this. And then here is metalness. Again, if we decrease the metalness, then it's less reflective. And we get something like this. How awesome is that? And then clear coat, what on earth is that? It does something, it adds some subtle changes along the edges, but I'm not really sure what this setting is. And then here's clear coat rough. Again, it changes some things, but I'm just not sure what this is. And then here is exposure, which just changes the exposure of the scene. Very cool. And then here is sphere height, which just does this. So, I mean, there you go. You can see GPT-5 is also really good at ray tracing and creating objects that are physically correct. Super impressive. Now let's also get it to code up some actually useful things that you might need in everyday life. For example, let's get it to create a beautiful CRM dashboard that offers real-time insights into sales, customer engagement, and marketing campaigns. Include interactive graphs and charts, etc., etc. Put everything in one HTML file. Let's click generate. Alright, so for this one, it thought for 23 seconds, and here is what we get. Notice that the sales funnel does not look perfect, so this is a flaw with this generation, but I'm sure you can prompt it further to fix this. And then here we have like total sales, conversion rate, new leads, etc. This pie chart looks pretty nice. So does this revenue trend. It even includes a 7-day moving average. Here's the campaign performance. And then down here we have an engagement heat map. And then at the top here, we can select the time range. So here is 7 days. We can also toggle this live button, which apparently adjusts these values. Of course, all of these values are just made up for now. And then for widgets, we can also select, which one of these containers to show in our dashboard. So because the sales funnel looks pretty ugly, let's just get rid of that and then click close. And then you can also drag these around like this. Very cool. Let me drag this one up here. So, you can reposition these however you want. But anyways, in just one prompt, here is a fully interactive CRM dashboard. And everything looks pretty nice. Here's another practical prompt, which you might actually need to use. Create a page where I can upload a video and apply different advanced effects to it in real time. Show the uploaded video and the final video side by side. Let's click generate. And here's what we get. So first, let me upload a video, and let me upload this video, which I generated with WAN 2.2, which is the best open source video generator you can use right now. Anyways, over here, we can select from different effects. Let's start off with none, and then here is grayscale. Indeed, it turns this into grayscale. Here is sepia, that's also correct. And then here is invert, that's also correct. And then here is brightness and contrast, and here we can adjust the settings for brightness. So this slider works. And then for contrast, this slider also works. Very nice. And then here is saturation. This slider also works. Very nice. And then here is hue. And indeed, this slider changes the hue, or basically the colors of the video. And then here is vignette. Unfortunately, this one is wrong. So it should apply this to the edges instead of the center of the video. And then here is sharpen. And this does look a bit sharper than the original video. Here is Gaussian blur. So if we increase the blur amount, indeed, it blurs this further. If we decrease this, then the blur is decreased. And then here is edge detect, and this also works. You can see it's able to detect the edges of all the objects in the video. And if I decrease this slider, here is what it does. And then RGB split, so if I drag this X and Y offset, and if I zoom into the video, here is what you get. Very cool. And then here is pixelate. This one also works. Let me increase the pixel size, and this is what you get. And then finally, posterize. This also works. Let's decrease the levels, and here is what you get. Very cool. So all of these settings, except for vignette, work. And again, it was able to code all of this with just one prompt, 0 shot. Next, here's another cool and practical app idea. Make a single interactive page for a mindfulness meditation guide, generating calm fractal patterns that evolve with breathing exercises with sounds. Include timers and progress trackers. Let's click generate. And here is what we get. So let's press start first and see what this gives us. Wow, this is very cool. So you can adjust the length, the goal breaths, the theme. Let's change the theme first. So here is forest. It just basically changes the color scheme to green. And then here is dusk. That's what you get, etc., etc. To create a taxonomy tree of big cat species, displaying their classification from family to genus to species, with hover over species descriptions. And here is what we get. So indeed, it starts with the family Felidae, and then we have the subfamilies, and then let's expand the genus, and here is what we get. Let's also expand this one, and this one, and this one. Very nice. And then if I hover over each one, it actually gives me a pop-up describing the species. Now there's one minor flaw with this, which is that the pop-up doesn't appear next to the item where I'm hovering over. But I mean, other than that, everything else works fine and the information is accurate. Here's another prompt that I'd like to test out. Create an interactive course on high school physics with visualizations and animations. Include just the first 3 lessons for now. Alright, here's what we get. So here's the first lesson, motion and kinematics. Let's play this animation and see if it works. And yes, it does. Let's reset this, and then let's decrease the initial velocity and the acceleration, and let's play this again. So it should move a bit slower, and that's indeed what we see. And you can see the metrics down here as well. Very cool. Now here's the second lesson, forces and Newton's laws. Let's press start, and then let's decrease the static friction so we can actually get this object to move. And indeed, the object is now moving, and then you can see the metrics down here. Although one minor flaw with this is that the labels are just all jumbled together. And then here's the third lesson. Let's press start. So we have this pendulum, and then we can see the potential and kinetic energies fluctuating as this pendulum swings back and forth. And then we can also play around with some of these settings and also increase the simulation speed. So eventually it should slow down and both energies should decrease to 0. And that's indeed what you see. All right, final test. I wanted to see how easily it hallucinates. So here I asked it to give me all the details about Stable Diffusion 5, which doesn't exist yet. And then here it says, I looked into the current information. As of now, there is no official release or announcement for something called SD5. The latest confirmed version is SD 3.5, which is correct. So that's a pass. It did not just make up some information about Stable Diffusion 5. It directly called out that this does not exist. Alright, so that sums up my tests on GPT-5. I hope this gives you a sense of all the things that it can and cannot do. Overall, I do find that it's really good at coding and it's less error-prone than the other top models. Anyways, next let's go over how you can use this. At the time of this recording, GPT-5 should already be out on Chatgpt for everyone to use, including free users. So here's my alt account, which is just on the free plan, and as you can see here, it says that I can use GPT-5. However, in this model dropdown, at least on the free plan, it's not going to tell you which version of GPT you're using. So in theory, you're supposed to get like a limited number of uses with GPT-5 every day for the free plan. And then after that's used up, then it's going to fall back to a less intelligent model. Now, one thing to note is that I did try running some prompts using this account, which is on the free plan, and it seems like its responses aren't as good as if I used GPT-5 on a paid plan. So my suspicion is that they might be using a smaller variant of GPT-5, like Mini or Nano, for this free plan. So note that for all the tests in my video, I'm using a paid plan, and I'm explicitly selecting GPT-5 over here. Alright, next let's go over its specs, pricing, and performance against other competitor models. Now here is SWE-bench Verified, which is a benchmark for software engineering, and here's where it gets pretty interesting. GPT-5 with thinking scores 74.9%, which is, I believe, currently the best score out of all AI models. A few days ago, Anthropic released Claude Opus 4.1, And, one of the benchmarks that they have always scored high on is this SWE bench verified. However, this latest version only scored 74.5%. So it looks like GPT-5 is slightly better in terms of coding. And that's also the vibe that I got after testing it with a ton of prompts. And then here are some other benchmarks for your reference. So again, these are just really minimal improvements over what was existing before. So without thinking, if you compare GPT-5 with a non-thinking model like 4.0, then it's only like 2% better. And then with thinking, it's only less than 2% better than OpenAI's 0.3. Same with like these charts over here. If you compare the non-thinking model with the non-thinking 4.0, it's only like a few percentage points better. So it's not like a significant improvement. Now, interestingly, for this benchmark called Health Bench Hard, which tests a model's ability to answer challenging health-related questions, here's where GPT-5 does very well. So even the non-thinking model scores 25%, whereas 4.0 scored 0. And then with thinking, it scored 46%, way better than OpenAI's 0.3. And then here is a really important metric. How often does it hallucinate when answering these health-related questions? So GPT-5 with thinking had the lowest hallucination rate of 1.6%. By the way, the hallucination rates of 0.3 and 4.0 are concerningly high. I would not want to use a model that makes things up 15% of the time when answering health-related questions. That's pretty damn dangerous. Anyways, these are just some of their reported benchmarks, and they're only comparing this with OpenAI's own previous models. So let's also look at how this compares with other competitor models. So if you look at LM Arena, this is where users can blind test different AI models. GPT-5 actually performs very well. It scores number 1 across all categories, including hard prompts, coding, math, creative writing, instruction following, longer query, and multi-turn. Pretty impressive. If you look at another independent leaderboard called LiveBench by Abacus AI, GPT-5 is also ranked number 1, slightly beating 0.3 Pro high. And if you look at another independent leaderboard called Artificial Analysis, GPT-5 is also ranked number 1, at least the high version. This is just 1 point above Grok 4. Now, if you compare the price of GPT-5 High, it's actually very reasonable. It's $3.4 per 1 million tokens, which is the same as Gemini 2.5 Pro. And it's way cheaper than Grok 4. So, in terms of both intelligence and cost effectiveness, GPT-5 is pretty damn good. Here we have another benchmark which scores AI models based on creative writing. And as you can see, GPT-5 is now ranked number 1, slightly ahead of Kimi K2 and ahead of Claude Opus 4.1. So if you're looking to write stories or novels, then GPT-5 is going to give you the best quality, at least according to this benchmark. And then finally, here is a super important benchmark called confabulations. So this basically looks at how often an AI hallucinates or makes things up versus just saying that the thing doesn't exist. So over here, the lower the value, the better. It means it hallucinates less. And as you can see, GPT-5 is actually ranked number 1, above GLM 4.5 and Qwen 3 and Gemini 2.5 Pro. So, on their announcement page where they said that GPT-5 is significantly less likely to hallucinate, this is actually correct. This is verified by this independent hallucination leaderboard. Anyways, that sums up the specs and pricing and benchmark scores of GPT-5 compared to other models.